Welcome to our deep dive into political systems. Did you know that only 20% of the world's countries are full democracies? Or that Estonia offers almost all public services online, including voting? These are just a few surprising facts we'll uncover. Political systems are everywhere. They shape our lives in ways we might not even notice. From the laws we follow to the services we use, everything is influenced by the way power is organized and exercised. In this video, we'll explore the fascinating world of political systems. We'll start by unraveling the basics and discovering different types. You'll learn how these systems evolve and the hidden forces that shape them. We'll also see how citizens around the world participate and look at the future of politics in the digital age. Stay tuned as we break down complex ideas into easy-to-understand concepts. By the end, you'll have a clear picture of how political systems work and why they matter to you. Ready to get started? Let's dive in. Chapter 1: Power Play – Unraveling Political Systems. When you think about political systems, what comes to mind? Most of us might think of governments, laws, and leaders. But a political system is much more than that. It's the way a society organizes its authority and distributes power. At its core, a political system is about who gets to make the decisions and how those decisions are made. Political systems have existed for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations like Greece and Rome had their own unique ways of governing. Greece is famous for its early form of democracy, where citizens could vote directly on laws. Meanwhile, Rome had a republic with elected representatives. Fast forward to today, and the world is still full of different political systems. Did you know there are over 190 countries, each with its own way of governing? That's a lot of different approaches to leadership. One interesting fact is that only about 20% of the world's countries are full democracies. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit, the rest are a mix of flawed democracies, hybrid regimes, and authoritarian regimes. Understanding political systems is crucial. It helps us see why countries act the way they do. For instance, why do some countries have free healthcare while others don't? It often comes down to the type of political system they have. Let's break it down further. In a monarchy, power is inherited. Think of Queen Elizabeth II in the United Kingdom. In contrast, a democracy elects its leaders. The United States, for example, holds elections every 4 years to choose its president. But not all democracies are the same. There are direct democracies where citizens vote on laws directly, like in Switzerland. Then there are representative democracies where people vote for officials who make decisions on their behalf, like in India. In authoritarian regimes, power is concentrated in the hands of a single ruler or a small group. North Korea is a prime example. Here, citizens have little to no say in how they are governed. Hybrid regimes mix elements of democracy and authoritarianism. Russia is often cited as an example of this. While it holds elections, the process is heavily controlled, and political opposition is limited. Every political system has its strengths and weaknesses. Democracies promote freedom and participation but can be slow to make decisions. Authoritarian regimes can make decisions quickly but often at the cost of personal freedoms. Knowing these systems helps us understand world events. When we hear about protests in Hong Kong or elections in Brazil, we can better grasp the underlying political dynamics. So, why does this matter to you? Because political systems affect almost every aspect of our lives. They influence the economy, education, and even the internet. By understanding them, we become more informed citizens. Chapter 2: Monarchs, Ministers, and Mavericks, Types of Political Systems. Let's dive into the different types of political systems. It's like exploring a fascinating world of governance. Each system has its own unique characteristics and history. Monarchies are one of the oldest political systems. In a monarchy, a king or queen rules the country. Power is usually passed down through the family. There are two types of monarchies, absolute and constitutional. In an absolute monarchy, the monarch has almost complete control. Saudi Arabia is an example. The king makes decisions without much input from others. This can lead to quick decision-making but often lacks checks and balances. On the other hand, a constitutional monarchy limits the monarch's powers. The United Kingdom is a great example. Here, the Queen has a symbolic role, and elected officials run the government. Next, we have republics. In a republic, the country is considered a public matter, and leaders are elected. The United States and France are well-known republics. They hold regular elections and have a clear separation of powers. Did you know that the United States has one of the longest-running continuous democratic governments in the world? Its constitution was adopted in 1787, and it's still in use today. Communism is another type of political system. In theory, it aims to create a classless society where everyone shares resources equally. China and Cuba are examples, though each has its own way of implementing communism. In China, the Communist Party controls the government. The party makes decisions that affect all aspects of life, from the economy to personal freedoms. Interestingly, while China has a communist government, it has embraced capitalism in many ways, especially in its economy. Socialism is often confused with communism, but there are key differences. In socialism, the government owns and controls major industries but allows for some private ownership. Countries like Sweden and Norway practice a form of socialism, often called social democracy. They provide extensive social services like healthcare and education but also support free markets. Anarchism is a more radical idea. It advocates for a society without government. Instead, people govern themselves through voluntary cooperation. While true anarchism is rare in practice, it has influenced various social movements. Then there's theocracy, where religious leaders control the government. Iran is a prominent example. Here, the supreme leader has significant power, and laws are based on religious principles. Another unique system is a technocracy. In a technocracy, experts and professionals make decisions based on their knowledge and expertise. While not common, some argue that this could lead to more efficient and effective governance. Each system offers different ways of organizing society and distributing power. Understanding these can help us appreciate the diversity of governance around the world. It also highlights why certain countries function the way they do and the challenges they face. So, whether it's a monarchy with a centuries-old tradition or a modern technocracy driven by data, each political system shapes the lives of its citizens in profound ways. Chapter 3: Blueprints of Authority: How Political Systems Evolve. Political systems don't just appear out of thin air. They evolve over time, influenced by culture, history, and societal needs. Understanding this evolution helps us see why countries govern the way they do today. Take ancient Greece, for example. It's often called the birthplace of democracy. But this didn't happen overnight. It started with city-states like Athens experimenting with citizen participation. The idea was that power should be in the hands of the people. Rome's political system evolved differently. It began as a monarchy, shifted to a republic, and eventually became an empire. Each phase brought changes in how power was distributed and exercised. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. Europe was dominated by feudal systems. Kings and queens ruled with the help of nobles, and the common people had little say. This changed with events like the Magna Carta in 1215, which began to limit the power of the monarchy in England. The Enlightenment period in the 17th and 18th centuries sparked new ideas about governance. Thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu argued for separation of powers and individual rights. Their ideas influenced revolutions in America and France, leading to the creation of modern democracies. An interesting fact is that the American Revolution was one of the first to implement the Enlightenment ideals. The U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1787, is a prime example of these principles in action. It established a system of checks and balances that is still in use today. Political systems can also evolve through revolutions. The Russian Revolution of 1917, for example, led to the creation of the Soviet Union. It replaced the monarchy with a communist government. This drastic change impacted not only Russia but also global politics for much of the 20th century. In contrast, some political changes are more gradual. In the United Kingdom, the shift from monarchy to a parliamentary system happened over centuries. Laws and traditions evolved to limit royal power and increase the role of elected officials. Cultural factors also play a huge role. In Japan, the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century modernized the country's political system. Influenced by Western ideas, Japan transformed from a feudal society to a modern constitutional monarchy. Economic factors can drive political evolution too. The Great Depression in the 1930s led to major changes in many countries. In the United States, it resulted in the New Deal, a series of programs and reforms that expanded the government's role in the economy. Technological advancements also influence political systems. The rise of the internet and social media has changed how governments interact with citizens. For example, Estonia is known for its e-government services, making it one of the most digitally advanced countries in the world. Political evolution isn't always peaceful. Wars and conflicts can drastically reshape political systems. The end of World War II, for example, led to the creation of new nations and the spread of democratic ideals. However, evolution can be halted or reversed. Authoritarian regimes may emerge in response to perceived chaos or instability. This can be seen in countries where democratic systems were replaced by dictatorships, such as in some African and Latin American nations during the 20th century. One unique quote from political theorist Samuel Huntington states, "Political order in changing societies is a central problem." This highlights how maintaining stability while evolving is a delicate balance. Today, we see political systems continuing to evolve. The Arab Spring of 2010-2011 is a recent example. It was a series of anti-government protests across the Arab world that led to changes in leadership and governance in several countries. Globalization also affects political evolution. Countries are more interconnected than ever, and international organizations like the United Nations play a role in shaping political systems. Migration is another factor. As people move across borders, they bring their political ideas and practices with them. This can lead to changes in both their home and host countries. Chapter 4: Behind the Curtain, the Invisible Forces in Politics. When we think about politics, we often focus on elected officials and visible leaders. But there are many invisible forces that shape political systems. These behind-the-scenes players can have a huge impact on how decisions are made. Lobbyists are one such force. They are professionals hired by groups to influence legislation and policy. In the United States, there are over 11,000 registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C. alone. They represent various interests, from big corporations to environmental groups. An interesting fact is that in 2020, lobbying spending in the US reached nearly $3.5 billion. This shows just how much money and effort goes into influencing political decisions. Think tanks are another key player. These are research organizations that provide information and analysis to help shape policy. The Brookings Institution and the Heritage Foundation are examples of influential think tanks in the US. They often produce reports and host events that sway public opinion and policymakers. The media also plays a critical role. News outlets can shape public perception and influence political agendas. A unique example is the role of social media in recent elections. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook have become battlegrounds for political messaging and misinformation. Behind the media, there are media moguls who own and control major news organizations. Their views and interests can subtly influence the news we consume. Rupert Murdoch, for example, owns a vast media empire that includes Fox News, which has a significant impact on American politics. Campaign donors are another invisible force. Political campaigns are expensive, and candidates rely on donations to fund their efforts. This can lead to a situation where wealthy donors have more influence over politicians than the average voter. In the US, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision in 2010 allowed for unlimited corporate spending in elections. This has led to the rise of super PACs, which can raise and spend vast amounts of money to support candidates and causes. Bureaucracies also shape political systems. These are the government agencies and departments that implement policies. While they are not elected, they have significant power in how laws are enforced and programs are run. For instance, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in the US makes important decisions about environmental regulations. These decisions can have widespread effects on industries and the public. Civil servants, who work within these bureaucracies, can be influential. They are often experts in their fields and can shape policy through their recommendations and actions. Their work is essential, but it's usually out of the public eye. International organizations also play a role. The United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank influence global politics and economics. They can affect how countries govern and make economic decisions. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are another force. Groups like Amnesty International and Greenpeace advocate for human rights and environmental protection. They use various strategies, from lobbying to public campaigns, to influence policies worldwide. Religious groups can be influential too. In some countries, religious leaders have significant sway over political decisions. For example, in Iran, the supreme leader, who is a religious figure, has more power than the elected president. Public opinion is a powerful, though often indirect, force. Politicians pay close attention to polls and public sentiment. If a policy or decision is unpopular, it can lead to protests, which in turn can force changes in policy. Special interest groups focus on specific issues. These can range from gun rights advocates like the NRA in the US to global health organizations fighting against diseases like malaria.